Alright, so nandito na tayo sa huling lesson natin for third grading period ngayong grade 10. So it's all about the biodiversity and ecology. No? So I think unahin muna natin yung biodiversity, no? Since ito yung nauna ko nabanggit. So biodiversity is the variation of organisms found on Earth. And then from the word itself, yung bio, which means life, and then yung diversity, it is the variety, no? So from the word itself, in its basic definition, biodiversity is the study of the variety of life. Ganun lang kasimple, no? So this has a three important levels, namely the species diversity, in which the variation of different species in a given area, and then genetic diversity, it is the variations of genetic characteristics expressed in varied phenotypic differences seen in a single species, and then ecosystem diversity, it is the variation of ecosystem that include differences in habitats, types of community, and abiotic environments in an area. So in species diversity, species is a population of morphologically and physiologically similar individuals that can successfully interbreed with each other, but is incapable of producing fertile offspring with other organisms. Genetic diversity. So this kind of diversity deals with the individuality of an organism in a species due to its genetic composition. And then yung ecosystem diversity, ecosystem consists of biotic and abiotic factors. Okay po, no? So, ano bang ibig sabihin ng biotic? Biotic, ito yung mga living things. And then yung abiotic factors, ito po yung non-living things. No? Interacting with one another in a given area. An area can have grasslands, forests, deserts, rivers, lakes of different types, and all of these are exemplifying ecosystem diversity. No? So, a biome is a large collection of flora and fauna. And yung flora, ito po yung mga plants, and then yung fauna, ito po yung mga animals occupying a major habitat. The importance of biodiversity is important to man because it provides a variety of material which are necessary for daily use. These materials includes the food we eat, water, wood, energy, and even medicine. These things and other non-material things that the nature provides falls under the ecosystem services. The ecosystem services has four types, just like yung provisioning services. It provides the material benefits we gain from nature. Regulating services, it manages processes such as pollination, water purification, and others. Cultural services, it provides non-material and aesthetic purpose for man. And then yung supporting services, which allows life to be sustained here on Earth. No? So, sa community ecology, community is a group of different populations of organisms living in a given area. No, madali na yan, no? Kasi ito'y natakal na natin yung grade 7 pa lamang kayo sa levels of biological organization. Community ecology is a field of research that aims to understand and explain the natural mechanisms that create, maintain, and determine the fate of biological communities. No? So, properties of community. Ay, hindi. Bago nga pala tayo dito, balikan natin to. It is achieved by observing and documenting patterns like vegetation zones. Yung tinutukoy ko dito ay yung community ecology, vegetation zones, species list, seasonal distribution of activity, and association of certain species. The information gathered are then utilized to generate hypotheses about processes which are tested. No? So, in terms of property sa community, meron tayong sukatan na ginagamit nating scale. No? Scale is the size of a community. No? In terms of this kind of definition dito sa lesson natin, ito yung definition ng scale. As long as the area of habitat is well defined, teka lang po ha. Yan, umubulang. And then, a community can be of any size, from a drop of water, a rock pool, a fallen rotting log, a grassland, a river, or even to the surface ng West Philippine Sea. No? So, spatial distribution, no? Is the distribution of species relative to each other. Some species provide that creates structural habitats for other species. These species in turn create habitats for others and so on. No, for example, these trees, no, in a rainforest are stratified or nahati, no, into several different levels, including an emergence layer canopy, or emergent layer na meron siyang 125 feet, and then yung under canopy, which consists of 95 feet, and then shrub level or understory, which is around 55 feet, and then yung ground level or sa iba tinatawag itong undergrowth, which is almost consists of 15 feet. No? And then in species richness is the number of species found in a given community. It is the number of species that is observed in a given area. This measure is dependent on who is observing, and thus it is sensitive to sampling procedure. So if in a pond you see a frog, goldfishes, and water lilies, then the species richness is 3. No? Nandun na siya di ba? And then, next po is yung species diversity. Is the number of species in the community and their relative abundances. Species are not equally abundant. Some species occur in large percentage of samples, while others are poorly represented. It takes the abundance of or number of individuals of different species into account, while richness does not. So, if you see 2 species of frogs, 4 species of goldfish, and 3 species of water lilies, then the species diversity would be higher for goldfishes. However, the species richness will remains the same. Kasi katulad yung sinabi ko kanina, di ba po, kung binalikan natin tong slide na ito, ayun na po yun, na nagde-define siya ng bilang ng species na makikita natin sa given community, kahit ilan po. No? And then, sa trophic structure, it is a hierarchy of feeding system in an ecosystem. It shows how nutrients and energy is passed from one organism to another by means of feeding. This may be illustrated in a form of food chain, food web, and energy pyramid. No? Katulad nung previous lesson natin nung tayo grade 8 pa lamang, no? Nandun po yun. So, ecological niche, no? So, each of these species play a specific role in the trophic structure. This is called ecological niche. It includes the type of food the organisms eats, its habitat, and its relationship with other organisms. Based on its ecological niche, the species in an ecosystem can be grouped into producers, consumers, or decomposers. No, alam niyo naman yung producers, mga ano yun, mga plants yun. And then, not only sa mga plants, kumbaga, yung may ibang mga organism just like yung mga cyanobacteria, no, they can produce just or they can medyo related siya dun sa ano din sa plants, no. Kumbaga tingnan niyo na lang dun sa ating mga previous lessons, no, kung ano yung mga differences or mga similarities nila. Yung consumers, just like yung herbivores, carnivores, and then omnivores, pati na rin yung mga decomposers, no. So, in energy pyramid, eto, natakal na natin ito nung grade 8, no? It contains levels for a group of certain organisms, no? Based on their role and the food they eat. These levels are called trophic levels, no? Tandaan natin na ang primary producers, no, ay nakakuha ng 100% na level ng energy. Then, nababawasan lang siya ng 10%, no? Sa primary, secondary, tertiary, hanggang sa apex predator, no? Na makakuha na lamang siya ng decimal percentages. And then, sa matter cycling or sa biogeochemical cycle, the producers absorb solar energy, nutrients, and compounds from their environment to produce sugar and oxygen gas, which will then be consumed by the consumers. No, not only limited dun sa water cycle, meron tayong carbon cycle or carbon dioxide and oxygen cycle, mayroon tayong oxygen cycle din, nitrogen cycle, phosphorus cycle, and sulfur cycle. Maraming mga cycle yan, no? So, when these organisms die, no, the decomposers will process the remains and return the nutrient to the soil. The nutrients and compounds can then be used again by another set of producers. This way, the matter from living organisms will be recycled for future use. No? So, ganun po. No? And then, when this organism, yun nga na takal ko na. And then sa ecological succession, um, it is the progressive replacement or um, change of one dominant type of species or community by another in a particular area or place until a stable climax community is established. This process is important in changing the structure or organisms making up a community. So, for example, in a new community of forest, the trees introduce shade to its ecosystem, allowing the lesser appearance of grasses and shrubs. This also changes the conditions of the abiotic factors in the area, like the fertility of the soil, ambient temperature, humidity, and other factors. During succession, the productivity declines but diversity increases. These activities lead to increased biomass, which is the total weight of living tissue in a community. Succession happens because each community stage prepares the environment for the stage following it in due time, no? So, meron tayong primary succession. So, succession may occur on places which are devoid of vegetation and has very little to no soil. Areas which where primary succession occurs may have harsh conditions. These include places recently covered by volcanic rock and lava or land which were formed after the glacier melts. No? These barren areas will eventually be inhabited by simple organisms such as lichens and mosses. This will set the initial formation of soil in the area. Then grasses and other small plants will then be able to grow in the area and further modify the soil until such time that shrubs and other larger trees will be able to grow in that area. The growth of large trees and other species tolerant to competition signals that the community has reached a state of stability. So, in secondary succession, sometimes a near stable or stable community becomes destroyed by incidents such as fire or human activities such as deforestation. The kind of succession that occurs in an area wherein a community once existed, the process of recovery begins sooner and its pace depends on the extent of damage caused by the disturbance. The order of appearance of the species will still be the same, from simple organisms such as mosses and lichens until larger trees and other competition-tolerant species occupy the area and reach a stable state. So, nandito na tayo sa ecological disturbances, no? So, they are the events that remove species from an area which causes changes in the availability of resources. Example of these are droughts, fire, floods, overgrazing, deforestation, quarrying, etc. From the word itself, disturbances create opportunities for new species to invade an area and establish themselves. No? Naghahanap sila ng panibagong habitat. So, these species slowly change the environment even more. The new species will eventually replace the original species until such time that the environment is sufficient enough to reach a stabilized state or climax community. So speaking of climax community, so it is a more or less the permanent and final stage of the particular ecological succession. These communities are characterized by slow rates of changes compared with the earlier more dynamic stages. The species that dominate this stage are species which are tolerant to competition for resources. During ecological succession, productivity decreases and species diversity increases. No, so they are um, inverse proportionate to each other. No, so it tend to be more ecological stable than succession communities. Early stages of succession show optimum growth and productivity. No, however, as succession goes on, species variety increases and nutrients recycling becomes more efficient. Now, it makes fuller use of inputs and maintain themselves thus they are more stable and sustainable. The young produced by climax species can live in that environment, unlike the young produced by succession species. So, nandito na tayo sa species diversity, ecological stability, and sustainability. No, so ecological stability, they have an increased biodiversity promotes ecological stability because it increases the probability that at least some living things will survive in the advent of massive changes in the environment. Another is that biodiversity, you know, um, ensures the availability of a rich variety of genetic material that may lead to the future agricultural or medical discoveries with significant value para sa ating lahat, no? Sa ating mga tao. Then it means that if diversity is lost, we lost the sources of these materials for discovery. Moreover, increased species diversity increases opportunities for adaptation, leading to higher species diversity in a process called adaptive radiation. So, ito yung mga indicators ng ecological stability and sustainability, just like um, inertia or persistence, which is the ability to resist disturbance or change. Constancy, they're the ability to stay within the limits defined by the environment, and then resilience, it is the ability to return back and repair moderate damages caused by changes in the environment. So, ecological stability and sustainability of living systems is achieved by surviving the changing environment through the mechanism of changes. Communities constantly change in response to changing environmental conditions. So, this is accomplished by evolutionary mechanism. So, next po is yung adaptation. Medyo bumalik tayo dun sa mga topics natin recently sa evolution. So, the various structures and behaviors or internal processes, or the special external and internal features that enable an organism to better survive or be successful in a particular environment. It gives the organism a higher probability to survive in its environment. These adaptive features have evolved over long periods of time through evolutionary processes, katulad ng sinabi ko po nung previous lesson natin. Example of adaptations include aquatic organisms like fishes and aquatic mammals have streamlined bodies built, for swimming, and then yung camouflage as in a cod, ability to blend in with its surrounding, or mimicry, and then physical features and adaptations help organisms to obtain food, defend themselves, and keep safe, build their habitats, withstand weather changes, and attract mates like the tail feathers of the peacock. And then yung humans have a large brain to modify their environment when necessary by using their own intelligence. Lahat ng tao may intelligence yan. And then, in disturbance of a community, one basic effect of human activity on communities are the community simplification, which is an overall reduction of species diversity. An example of an agricultural practice of man that is decreasing species diversity is the monocrop farming that creates a monoculture of the single favored crop species such as corn or rice. There are many causes of ecological disturbances, mostly due to human activities, and then some of the more common ones are loss of habitats, including diseases, competitors and predators, all forms of pollution. It's either air, water, and soil, human overpopulation and overuse and overharvesting of resources. All of these causes decrease in species diversity, which leads to species extinction. One important ecological disturbance which leads to other forms of disturbances is human overpopulation, or paglobo ng populasyon ng tao, So, in terms of population ecology, another topic dito sa lesson natin, So, population is the group of individuals of a species interacting with each other in a given area, And then, sa population, may encounter natin dito yung salitang demography. So, ano yung demography? It is a field of study which deals with statistical studies of populations, which allows inference from current data to predict population changes. So, meron tayong three important features na population size, population density, and population dispersion. So, population size, it is the number of individuals in a given area. This feature is directly affected by birth rate, which is the number of individuals born in a year, and then yung death rate is yung mga namamatay kada taon. Then, just wait for a while. So, ayan po, muli tayo nagbabalik. So, in this graph, or bar graph, no, it's shown below are differentiated population graphs that shows a population that is rapidly growing compared to a population that is showing small or slow population growth, and a population that is exhibiting zero population growth. No, so next po is yung population density. So population density, it is the number of individuals of a species per unit area or volume. No, so the individuals of a certain species may opt to move from one place to another, which is called the migration. Meron tayong dalawang klase ng migration, which are the emigration and then immigration. Ano yung pinagkaiba nila? Immigration is the movement of individuals into of a population. Yung immigrants, no? Sa madaling salita. For example, galing ka ng Amerika, mag-i-immigrate kayo papunta dito sa Pilipinas, no? And then yung emigrate is the movement of individuals out of a population. So ako, kunyari gusto kong pumunta ng Amerika, magiging emigrant ako kasi aalis ako dito sa certain population ko. Yun po yung differences nila, no? So, dito na tayo sa population density. Aside from the movement of the individuals of a species, there are also two kinds of limiting factors that affect the population density. So, they are density-dependent factors and density-independent factors. So, ano yung pinakaiba nilang dalawa? Based na rin dito, na so, sa density-dependent factors are the biotic factors living in an ecosystem. The effects of these factors increase as the population of a species increases then. So, these factors includes diseases and or disorders and presence of the competition. What about the density-independent limiting factors? No? They are the abiotic factors sa ating ecosystem that affects the population regardless of its density. Example of this factor includes temperature, humidity, weather, and climate of an area. No? So, sa population dispersion, it describes the spacing of the organisms relative to each other. Or spatial clustering of organisms in an area. Meron tayong tatlong kinds ng population dispersion. Sa clump dispersion, the population tends to be found in cluster in a sample area. So, kapag clump, no, kumbaga sama-sama or nagtitipon lang sila sa isang area. Nag-groupings nga, ika nga. And then yung sa random dispersion, randomly scattered or nakakalat lang kahit saan. And then yung uniform dispersion, ito po yung the distribution of the organisms tend to be evenly distributed or nasa maayos na position sila. Or nakapila ng maayos or maganda lang talagang tignan, di ba? Just like yung nakikita nyo dyan. So, in carrying capacities, it is the maximum population size that can be supported by the available resources in a given area. The ideal number of organisms in a given area is determined by the resources available in that area. So, if a certain population size exceeds its resources, then there is a condition called overpopulation. This means that in terms of carrying capacity, once again, this means that the resources are rapidly depleting and exhausted, thus problems like competition, degradation of the environment, limited food and water supply, lack of space, diseases, and death can occur. In terms of human population, no, the current human population on Earth is at 7 billion and is increasing at a rate of 70 to 80 million yearly. Statistics have shown that the human population growth is exhibiting a J-shaped structure or J-shaped curve, which indicates that there is an exponential growth, no, in the population over the years that have passed. No? Ano yung pinakaiba ng J-shape at saka S-shape? No? So yung J-shape, ibig sabihin yan exponential growth. No? Lalo lumulobo or lalo dumadami yung population sizes, which is dependable din sa bawat oras or yung taon na lumilipas. And then sa S-shaped curve, no, nakikita natin yung logistic growth, no. In terms of lumalago nga yung ating population size, medyo hindi naman sa nagde-decline, nagiging constant lang yung nagiging growth once na nandun siya sa peak. That because meron silang limited carrying capacity, no. kung ano lang yung sapat na kakayanan na meron lang makabuhay sa particular na population na yun. So according to this world population, from 1950 to 2050, there are several factors that have contributed to this dramatic increases of the human population. This includes the technology, culture, and then yung society natin. So, there are several factors that have contributed just like this. In technology has advanced at an unprecedented rate over the years, and then scientists in the medical field have developed technology, improved medicines, healthcare, sanitation, and nutrition, which has weakened and eradicated some diseases that once threatened the human race. No? Specifically, lalo ng panahon ngayon ng pandemya, no? And then, in underdeveloped countries, the degraded status of women contributed to the increased population. Some cultures never gave women other roles in society aside from rearing a child. No, yun yung factor nun na malaking bagay kung saan makaka-apekto yun sa ating human population. Na kung saan parang sineset aside natin yung mga kababaihan, pero hindi dapat po ganun, no? Mamaya malalaman natin sa susunod na slide. The lack of education also contributed to the increase of the population in the same way. Mahirap yan, lalo na sa mga kabataan natin ngayon na hindi natin natutukan na kanilang pag-aaral or hindi sila nakakapag-aaral. No? So, effective measures to slow down increase in human population to prevent further damage caused by overpopulation of humans on Earth. There are ways studied and developed to slow down, the increase of human population, just like yung education, no, para sa mga bata, no. Specifically in terms of education, kailangan maturuan mo sila ng family planning and then yung tamang pangangalaga sa mga bata, no. Then promotion of respect for women and children, specifically sa mga kababaihan, no, na kung ano yung kayang gawin ng mga kalalakihan, kaya din gawin ng mga kababaihan yung mga trabaho na ginagawa din natin mga kalalakihan, no. So ayun po yun. And then para sa mga bata, dapat ma-nurture sila throughout the environment sa kung ano man yung matutuklasan nilang not only knowledge but yung skill na kailangan nila. And then yung eradication of violence, no. And then health improvement for women and children, promotion of responsible parenthood, no. Kasi ito yun minsan na sa panahon natin ngayon, marami akong mga nakikilala mga kabataan din na kung saan porket yung parang nagsama na sila sa isang bubong, no, or nag-live-in, and then somehow nag-live-in nga pero wala silang ganong sapat na kaalaman para makabuhay ng isang pamilya, or somewhat na hindi sila marunong mag-handle ng pera bilang isang responsableng maging isang magulang. Mahirap yun, no, lalo na pag nagkaanak sila, and then somehow paano nila mapapalaki na maayos, di ba? Yun yung mahirap. Kumbaga, kailangan pa rin natin i-promote or ma-educate yung mga kabataan natin ngayon in terms of responsible parenthood. Not limited to the following na lahat ng sinabi ko doon, pero kailangan maging knowledgeable dapat yung mga kabataan pagdating talaga dito. And then lastly, effective gender equity, no. Gender equity, no, kumbaga nagkakaroon tayo ng equal rules para sa lahat, no. It's either kung lalaki ka man or babae ka man, no. So, and then last one, intervention to lessen human impact of the environment. Aside from controlling the fast pace of increase of human population, so there are ways which were studied to directly act on the affected ecosystem on Earth. So, una, conservation of the remaining agricultural lands, freshwater, and other environmental resources. Rehabilitation of destroyed natural resources, promotion and implementation of environmental jurisprudence, and then creation of marine sanctuaries and ecological corridors, and protection of the protected areas. And then distribution of materials for use of the alternative sources of energy. So, ayun, no, ang haba, no, pero doon na po nagtatapos yung ating lesson. Kung meron kayong mga questions, clarifications, or concerns, leave a comment below. And then, No, so, that's all for today. See you sa next video or sa next lesson. So, as of this moment, paalam. For grading na tayo guys, no? Malapit na tayo matapos.